Hello. Alright, so quick disclaimer before I get into the meat of what I want to talk about. Um, I have not slept since I worked, so I've been awake since oh shit. Maybe like 10 a.m. yesterday. So I've been almost awake for 24 hours. So I bring this up because when I say stupid shit, that's just wrong. That's just objectively wrong. I probably don't mean it. And that being said, today I'm gonna go over all the teams in the Miraidon division, and honestly, depending on how I feel after, I might just immediately start recording for Koraidon. So then I'll be especially stupid. Um, but yeah, we'll figure it out. I'm not gonna be doing like a ranking. I kind of have a hard time like ranking teams without any results or like seeing how people play because in my mind the team is a combination of what Pokemon you've actually drafted and how well you can use them, right? You could draft all the best Pokemon in the game, but if you're not comfortable with them, you're probably not going to do very well. And on the other end of the spectrum, you could draft Pokemon that maybe are not the best, but if they sort of mesh with you well, then you're going to find results. Um, so I am not comfortable doing rankings until like maybe week 2 or week 3. It might be even longer until I'm, posting rankings. Um, there is an aspect of like a team's objective strength. I think that is something that can be measured, but that's kind of what I'm planning on talking about. I'm not gonna compare teams to one another. I just want to sort of look at like what is going on basically with all these drafts, and I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit more like focused because a lot of times when I record videos like this, I go off track really bad. But I'm gonna try to stay dialed in. Inevitably, I will fail, but I'm gonna try my best. And I'm just gonna go through it in the order that the draft occurred. And I'm also going to be skipping mine because I recorded a 30-minute video about my draft already. So if you want to hear my thoughts on my own draft, go watch that one instead. Um, but yeah, I want to talk about the other teams because I think they're all really interesting. I think they're all really cool. And there are certain things that I think are powerful and weak about each of them, and I want to talk about it. Um, and yeah, we'll just start with Alex. So this is my week 1 opponent. So I really haven't looked at the matchup at all. Like I said, I got out of work at 6, and then I did a couple errands, and now I want to record. So I haven't actually done any prep yet. Um, but this team is really interesting to me because it's pretty top heavy. Right, we have a 20 pointer, a 19 pointer, and a 19 pointer as the first 3 picks, and then there's a lot of like really low cost Pokemon here, like Granbull for 5, Lurantis for 4, Orthworm for 5. Even like Basculegion female and Cinderace are below 10, so you spent most of your budget here, right? We had 115 points in total. The first 5 picks was 83 points worth, which means you're spending what, 80% of the budget? No, that's not true. I told you I was going to be stupid. I'm not competent enough to do math right now. It's less than 80, I know that. Um, but yeah, so the draft is very sort of dependent on like how well these 5 Pokemon can do into a given matchup. And the thing that sort of stood out to me is they share like a lot of weaknesses. Mainly ground, which I don't think being weak to ground is inherently the worst because there's not a lot of ground types, but in matchups where your opponent has a strong ground type, I think it's going to be pretty tricky. Um, I'll also say, like, I was talking with a few people before the draft started, and we were sort of like comparing our analysis of the format, and a general consensus that at least the people that I was talking with came to is that both Dragonite and King Gambit were like kind of point traps because I think they are both like Dragonite especially, but both of them are so reliant on Terra that it's going to be pretty tricky to be able to like maneuver having, all three of your first three picks have a 4x weakness. So if some random Pokemon just has psychic coverage, they can hit your Sneasler and probably knock it out in one hit unless you're sashed. Dragonite is like a little bit less susceptible to like getting hit by a random ice move because you can be multi-scale, and also ice coverage isn't like that popular, I guess. Like a lot of water types have ice beam, but you can figure that out and prep accordingly. And then King Gambit being 4x weak to fighting is, I think, like one of the worst things that you can be in this format because fighting coverage is so easy to find, right? Like random fire types are just going to have low kick for no reason. Um, so I think being 4x weak to fighting and not having a way to get rid of it outside of like the one-time use of a Chople Berry is not the best. I also think Electabuzz it's an amazing follow me user, but I don't think it really does this team like it's not the best redirector for this team because when you're using redirection, especially in a format with the no Terra, I feel like you want your redirector to be turning super effective hits into not very effective hits, and Electabuzz can't do that for Sneasler and King Gambit ground moves, right? Um, and it's not like you can throw Shuckleberry Berry on Electabuzz because it has to be Eviolite like 99% of the time, right? Sometimes like you can run a Focus Sash if you're expecting to like take one giant hit, but usually you're going to want to be Eviolite. Um, but that being said, I think the lower picks kind of patch the ground weakness. Earthworm's immune to ground. That's pretty good. Having a Steel type that's immune to ground is really nice. Um, Lurantis as your grass type, I'm not a huge fan of, especially because I don't think this team has a Trick Room setter. Oh no, there's Gothitelle. So you can set Trick Room for Lurantis with Gothitelle, but like I don't know. The team is like the speed tiers are pretty nice, right? 120 on Sneasler is amazing. 119 on Cinderace is good. It's not as necessary when you have Sneasler already. Um, and then there's like this nice ladder of like the 105 to 80 is a good like middle point. And this is something that I'll emphasize a lot. Like the reason that you want your speed tiers to be like sort of laddered, you don't want them to all just be like bunched really fast or really slow, is if all of your Pokemon are already outspeeding everything on your opponent's team, they just won't invest in speed. They have no reason to, and they invest in bulk instead. And then you just waste your speed advantage, right? Like, yeah, you're moving first, but they have so much more bulk that like it doesn't really help you that much. And then on the opposite end of if all your things are really slow, like sure you don't have to invest in speed, but your opponent doesn't either, so then you don't really gain an advantage from it. But having this like laddered speed means like a base 70 Pokemon is going to want to have some investment to like try to outspeed a slower Basculegion, and they can't run like uninvested because if the Gothitelle is like hitting it for super effective damage and you try to speed creep a base 70, like there's a bunch of mind games that you have to play with that, right? So the speed tiers are something that I'm gonna look at a lot, and I think that's like a very important aspect of draft that maybe people don't think about as much as they probably should, at least in my opinion. Um, but yeah, like there's so many of these like relatively slow and like 45 is definitely slow uh Pokemon, and like you don't really have that reliable of a Trick Room, so I think that's going to be a little bit tricky. Something else that stands out to me is like pretty much the entire team is physical. um let's see, yeah, like your highest special attack stat is Basculegion and Dragonite, which if Dragonite is your highest special attacker, I think that's maybe a little bit alarming. Um, and you can see the difference, right? There's a 30-point difference in the average between attack and special attack. So any like Iron Defense Pokemon are probably going to come into this team because if you get one or two up, like you're probably not getting KO'd by really anything. Um, I noticed this before I started recording. They spelled Overlord wrong. They put an A in it for some reason. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of funny. Um, but yeah. Anyway, going back to this. Um, it's a team where like I think the picks independently are very strong, but there's not a lot of synergy between the two. Or between the entire team is kind of the point that I want to make. Um, you can look at all these Pokemon in a vacuum and say like, yes, Sneasler is objectively a strong Pokemon, but then the first thing that I'm looking for if somebody drafts Sneasler is like, okay, where's your terrain setter? Because it's just like such a good tool to have, just like a guaranteed unburden proc. And then you become, I think, almost uncontested the fastest thing in the format. I don't think there's anything that can be faster than an unburdened, unburdened Sneasler. Outside of like Tailwind being set up and something is naturally faster and stuff like that. Um, so yeah, like not having any terrain support is pretty tricky. Again, I will double down on like this ground weakness is pretty significant. Um, Dragonite being immune is pretty nice, but your only resists outside of that are Lurantis and Orthworm, which are not the most reliable. Um, and in terms of like the offense and the pressure that you are outputting against ground types, again, it's Lurantis and Basculegion, which they're both pretty slow. So a fast ground type is just going to knock out your Sneasler or knock out your Electabuzz before your Basculegion or your Lurantis can like do something about it. Um, and normally you could use redirection to sort of get around that, but Electabuzz is also weak to ground. So the redirector isn't solving the problem, which I think you would probably want. Um, I'm not. Last season, I made like suggestions on Pokemon that people could consider like picking up for their team. I don't have time to really do that, but I will say like if there is like a decent Rage Powdermon on the board, I would consider like maybe you drop Cinderace and like try to find a good Rage Powder user, something like that. Just some way to like help out a little bit with the ground weakness because I think the ground weakness is going to be pretty relevant. Um, is there anything else that I want to mention? Oh, I guess I can talk about the speed control. I already mentioned Trick Room a little bit. Dragonite, I believe, is the only Tailwind setter. Yeah, because I don't even know what else could possibly have Tailwind. I know obviously Electabuzz has Electro Web. Um, that might be it. Sneasler has like Rock Tomb, I'm pretty sure, but I don't think you want to use Sneasler for speed control. Um, yeah, I'm not fully convinced about this team, but like I said, like it really is just going to come down to like how Alex uses it. So I get to experience it firsthand, uh, in the first week. So I could be saying all this and then I get my ass beat and I look like an asshole. So I guess we'll find out. But I think that's all I have to say about Alex's team. Now we can move on to Pangy. The point totals don't matter. All right. So this team is pretty interesting. There's like quick overview. The first thing that I see, there's the Hippowdon Escadrille like Sand mode. You have Disquick with Rotom Wash and Escadrille, which is nice. You also have your other ground immunity in Altaria, and you have Fletchender. Um, the Fletchender, I think, is a cool like budget pick, right? Because it's just a Gale Wings Tailwind user. So you have like priority Tailwind access for Golden Go without like burning a bunch of points on something like Murkrow, which I don't think Murkrow was drafted at all, which good for everybody because Murkrow I think was bad in this. Um, P2 was something that I was initially interested in drafting, but was kind of talked out of, and I am still not like sure exactly how I feel about P2 in this format. I'm curious to see how it's going to be used. It has a lot of coverage, which is really nice. And only being weak to fighting is pretty manageable, but I think like P2's main like claim to fame was kind of being able to go for like a Terra Poison, Terra Blast, and get like download boosts and all that stuff. Um, this format I think is going to be harder for P2 to use like a physical download boost, and if you're like careful with your team building, you can force it to have a attack boost from download. So I don't know, maybe we'll see like double edge P2 like back in Sun and Moon and stuff like that. I think it was Sun and Moon. Who knows? Chestnut's really cool. I love Chestnut. It's a wide guard user. It's like a annoying like leech seed, iron defense, body press kind of thing. There's some cool stuff you can do with it. Scrafty is just really good. It's basically like a Ensign before Ensign, right? Intimidate and fake out. I don't think it has parting shot, but I don't remember. Golden Go is really good. I have generally been underwhelmed with Golden Go in the past 2 seasons of draft because I think people just use it as like I will give it Choice Scarf or I will give it Nasty Plot or Choice Specs I mean or Nasty Plot, and like it only clicks attacking moves. But I think Golden Go has like a really interesting defensive move pool as well. Like it has some stuff like it has Recover. It has like Thunder Wave, it has Trick, all that stuff. Like there's a lot of cool things you can do with it. I don't know if we'll see that. I don't know if it's really warranted when you can just click Make It Rain and take one hit KOs. Um, but I would like to see some more like tricky Golden Go sets, if it's like appropriate. Clefable as your redirector is really good, because it's a fairy type. It can like kind of go on the offensive, right? It has 95 special attack, which is acceptable. Um, and also like unaware is just really good. Really in any context. You also have like Magic Guard so that you can be immune to your own sand chip, which is pretty cool. I talked about P2 a little bit. Rotom is just an amazing utility Pokemon. I personally will never draft Rotom Wash because if I have a water type, I want to be able to click a strong, guaranteed to hit water move. So I'm drafting like one of the starters so I can click Water Pledge, or like what I did in this draft, I got Palafin, which I can just click Wave Crash. Um, because I think I would go crazy if I had to click 80% accurate moves again after what happened in last season. Um, yeah, I don't want to do that again. Um, Escadrill. Escadrill's cool. It's a good steel type, it's a good ground type, and those are two really important types to have in this format when there's limited ground and steel types. Um, the overlap with Golden Go is like not that big of a deal because I don't know, like they're both weak to fire, but that kind of doesn't matter because you can just hit all the fire types with EQs and stomping tantrums and stuff. Um, Kleavor's awesome. I think Kleavor's a really cool Pokemon. Sharpness is just a broken ability. I think every Pokemon with sharpness is just good. And that's not true because Veluza has it too, and Veluza's ass. But Kleavor's pretty cool. I think it's like the third best sharpness user, which is not saying much when there's like only four, but it's still cool. Um, Stone Axe is a cool attack that like sets up Stealth Rocks for you. So if you want to play a more like pivot heavy game with like Yawn on Hippowdon, you can do that and like force your opponent to take like the Rocks chip. Um, I don't know how much we'll see that, if at all, but it is something that can happen, and that's pretty cool. Scrafty I talked about. Hippowdon, like I said, it has Yawn. It has Slack Off, I think, or Shore Up, one of the two. For like recovery, it's just like a bulky, pretty physically strong sand setter. That's all you really need it for. Altaria is cool because it deactivates weather. So I guess if you're playing into like, there's what one, I think there's one rain team and one sun team in this division. So if you just like don't want to deal with it with sand, I assume it would be more for the rain than it would be for the sun. But if you just like don't want to deal with the rain, you can just bring Cloud9 on Altaria and then problem solved. Like Archaludon can't Electro Shot when Cloud9 is up, and that's great. Matchup solved. Chestnut I talked about, Fletchender I talked about. It's a cool team. Um, there's like a decent amount of 4x weaknesses, but they aren't like the same 4x weaknesses, which is fine. And also most of them are on like your really cheap Pokemon, so it doesn't really matter. Um, let's see. The water weakness, it's a sand team, like that just happens. Um, and even then, it's only three, like, or it's four. No, it's three. Fletchender's not real. Um, one thing also that I'm gonna do for the base set total, I'm just gonna take Fletchender out. Yeah, because like look at how far it gets dragged down with Fletchender. Um, so yeah, like the base set total's not bad. Um, this is another one where like your special attackers are limited from the looks of it. No, that's not even true though, because like you have Golden Go, which is ridiculous, and then like Rotom and P2 for special attackers, so that's totally solid. It probably, yeah, it just gets like dragged down by all these like low stats on the physical attackers. Um, excuse me. And then physical attacking wise, right? You've got 135, 130, 107. Like I think you're totally covered. Um, the speed tiers, having your fastest being Escadrille at 88, typically like on paper is not the best, but it's Sandrush, so it's twice what it would be. It's not a big deal. Um, and your Trick Room setter is very reliable, right? You have a lot of ways to like assist in getting Trick Room up. You have Fake Out on the Scrafty, you have Follow Me on Clefable, and P2 is pretty rarely getting one shot by attacks. If I would not be surprised if there's like less than 10 attacks that can consistently one shot a Porygon in this format. I guess it would maybe be like a Guts boosted like CC from Conkeldurr or something like that would probably get it. But I don't know. I don't remember what other like strong fighting types got drafted. Who cares? Um, yeah, I think having like there is the staircase, right? It's probably the the like smallest integration of staircase possible, where it's like 2 1 1, 4, and then there's like a pretty big jump here, and then it's back to like 4 0 2, and then 11. So like the range is not crazy. So if you lose the sand, you could be in some trouble with faster teams, but it's not a big deal because the team is like it's pretty bulky. It lets you play defensive. Um, and like I said, Trick Room shouldn't be too difficult to get activated. So I think being like on the slower end is totally manageable. Um, let's see, anything else that I want to mention? No, I think that's about it. Um, this is one of those teams where I have to see it in action because on paper I'm not the biggest fan, but I also just don't like playing sand, so that's probably a little bit of bias on my end. Um, yeah, I'm excited to see what it does. Obviously, Pangy's an amazing player, so I'm sure it's gonna do better than anybody would like be able to expect. All right, so next is it's not loading. There we go. Next is Doxy. This team is interesting. Um, I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on. Um, let's see, where do I want to start? I guess we'll just start with the poll. So Dragapult was one of the Pokemon that the people I had the quick discussions with about the draft sort of agreed that it maybe wasn't the best pick. Um, because like I think being weak to Sucker Punch in this format where you can't Terra sucks. Especially when you're pretty frail. So I can see a lot of games where like if Dragapult gets out of position for even one turn against a Pokemon that has like a stab Sucker Punch, it might just get one shot. And I don't think that's something you really want from your, number one pick that costs, I think, like 19 points. Yeah. Um, that being said, you do have triple fake out plus the most reliable follow me user in the format in the 1 point Centret. Um, so there are ways to like get around it, but I do think it can be like a little bit problematic if your number one pick like can't attack for 5 turns in a row because it's sitting in front of a Sucker Punch Mon that would just like one shot it. Um, Mienshao, it's a good solution to all the dark types that are trying to click Sucker Punch into your Dragapult, right? You just click CC and knock them out before, and then problem solved. Um, and also, like, having inner focus means that you don't have to play games of like fake out versus fake out, although it probably wouldn't be that big of a deal anyway when Mienshao is so fast. Similarly for like Weavile, right? It's just, I think it might be the fastest fake out in the format. Don't quote me on that. Um, but I really like Weavile in draft. I think anything that's like above 120 base speed just gets like such a boost in usefulness in draft. Um, so like Weavile being as fast as it is and like threatening as much damage as it can, it's a very valuable Pokemon to have. It has like a lot of like tricky things that it can do. I talked about Fake Out already. It has beat up if you had like some way to proc, stamina on like Archaludon or Rage Fist and stuff. That's not available on this team, but it is a thing that Weavile can do in the right context. Pickpocket is a really funny ability, especially if you're running like Focus Sash on Weavile, because it gets brought down to Sash and then you can just steal an item. And it kind of doubles in usefulness because you get to learn one of your opponent's items and you also just remove the item from them. So you get information and like an actual advantage in the game. Toxtricity is pretty cool. I think it might struggle in a no Terra format. Um, Again, being weak to ground I think is tricky. Not a lot of people have like good ground types, but the people that do, like, I don't know if there are any decent ground type moves that Toxtricity could realistically survive. Um, because its defense is like bad, isn't it? Yeah, 70. It's not great. Um, Tinkaton as your fairy, I think, is a little tough, and especially because it's Tinkaton as your fairy and your steel, and it is not very threatening offensively. Um, it's a good utility mon, right? Mold Breaker Fake Out's really nice for like all the priority blocking Pokemon. Um, and you have a second pickpocket user if you wanted it. Um, it's like special defense is good, I think. Yeah. Um, I think like in terms of fairies that you could have, it's not the best, but it's definitely not the worst. Um, and just having such a good defensive typing means that like you can sort of play around um, your opponent, right? If you're like, again, going back to like, oh, there's a bunch of dark types trying to sucker punch my Dragapult, let me just switch into Tinkaton and then I take 0 damage if they like click dark move that isn't sucker punch. Um, so that's like totally fine. Slowking, I don't really know that much about Slowking. I know that it like has expanding force, but that's not going to be a thing on this team. Sets Trick Room, has Chilly Reception, which is cool, but there's not really like a snow user on this. Like the only Pokemon that actually benefits from it is Weavile because of the defense boost. Unless there's like something that has Weather Ball that I don't know, which I don't think is the case. I don't know. I have to see what it does. Gliscor, I believe they had Gliscor last draft as well, and it was like pretty good for them. It's a ground type. It's pretty strong. It's actually not that strong. I thought that 125 was its attack stat. um, 95 is like okay. I think you would rather have Gliscor than like not have a ground type. Um, yeah, you can do like the poison heal stuff. Hypercutter, I believe, makes you immune to Intimidate because it prevents you from getting your attack dropped. Yeah. So it's a ground type that's immune to Intimidate, which is nice. Um, and then also if you want to use it more defensively, you can go with the poison heal set. Superior, I love Superior. I do think it's really reliant on Terra though, because like otherwise the only move that it can like generally click, like it's gonna go for Leaf Storm. It'll always have Leaf Storm, and it'll probably always have Dragon Pulse. Like those are like the only two moves that it really can click without Terra. Um, so that might get a little bit limiting. I think it's a great mon though, and it's really good as a grass type as well. Because like if you're looking for a grass type, it's fast and it gets strong. It doesn't start strong, but it gets strong. Sentret was really clever. I think initially they had picked Furret and then realized that Furret sucks as much as Sentret, so why would you pay extra points for it? And I think that was really clever. Um, it being the only form of redirection on the team is like a little bit tricky because I don't know how many weeks you're gonna need redirection so bad that you're willing to commit one of your Pokemon to being Sentret. But I don't know. I guess if you're playing a matchup where like Trick Room just wins you the game, you just lead like Sentret, Slowking, click Trick Room, click Follow Me, and let Sentret get KO'd, and then send. Like, it would probably be Snorlax on the field and just like Belly Drum and win. So there's some lines that you can do with Sentret, but I don't know how many games it'll come to. Frisk is a good ability in draft because you get to learn the items, but again, it's like, is that information worth dropping one of your Pokemon to bring Sentret? And I think generally the answer would be no. Um, I don't know if it has like all the utility stuff that Sentret does, or that Furret does, because I think Furret has like knockoff and encore and like what else? It has. I know it has like chilling water because everything has chilling water. There's some other ones that I can't remember off the top of my head, but like Furret has a pretty extensive move pool. I don't know if Sentret has the same. Um, Once again, I'm gonna remove Sentret. Yeah, so the base set total is pretty high. Um, it's a nice spread of physical and special attackers, which is good. Um, yeah, base set total wise, I think it's fine. I'm jumping around. I'm getting distracted. Skeleturge, I really like Skeleturge. I think without Terra, I think it's better and worse. Um, because like Torch Song is such a scary move that if you like let it get out of control, then you're just gonna lose. But Skeleturge also has like quite a few weaknesses that are pretty exploitable, right? Like the water weakness is pretty exploitable, the ground weakness is exploitable. Rock, not so much. I think Rock was the least drafted type in the entire draft. And then Ghost. I guess Ghost is protected by Descentret. So that's another like little synergy for Sentret. Again, I don't know how relevant that will be, but I guess it is a thing that you have to think about. Um, and it also like kind of doubles down on the idea of like this team is probably not going to win the game with burst damage, but if you just like let the Superior get out of control or let the Skeleturge get out of control, you're just going to lose. And then finally the Snorlax. Snorlax is cool. Um, I don't know if the team has enough support to like reasonably get belly drum sets off. Again, you do have the triple fake out, which is really good. Um, but again, your only redirector being Sentret, that's rough. Um, I'm sure there'll be some matchups where Snorlax just gets a belly drum off and like can win, or if you can't get the belly drum off, then Snorlax will just win. and it has pretty good coverage. It's kind like, this is not going to sound normal. It's kind of like P2 in the sense that like it's just a really defensive normal type that has like really deep coverage. Um, so like some matchups it'll just be really good, and then other ones it just won't be bringable. Um, and then thick fat and gluttony are great abilities to just help it like stay on the field. And immune, I don't know if immunity will ever be relevant. It probably won't. Um, let's see. Anything else overall? Gliscor can't earthquake on this team without an air balloon. If you wanted to do something else on the turn, like obviously you can just protect an earthquake, but if you want to like accomplish another goal and earthquake without hitting yourself, you have to use air balloon. Um, and let's see the speed tiers. Dragapult obviously is a great speed tier. It's like, I think it's the second fastest Pokemon in the whole format to Electrode. Um, so that's great. Weavile, I've already mentioned like how useful its speed is. Superior has a pretty nice speed tier where like it's going to outspeed a majority of the format, and you can just glare stuff in order to cut the speed. Mienshao being over 100, also great. It's good for fake outs where you don't have to like worry about your fake out not going first, because you're probably always going to be the fastest fake out. I guess unless Weavile is also on the field. Um, Gliscor's speed stat, I don't know how relevant it is when it mainly wants to be like a bulky Pokemon. Tinkaton is kind of the same. Like, I don't think you're really going to be running a fast Tinkaton very often. Toxtricity, I think, is like kind of the designated Scarf Pokemon. Like, it's almost always going to be like choiced in some way, probably Scarf or Specs. Um, so its speed is like semi-relevant, and then the rest of these Pokemon, like, they don't care. Skeletor does not care about its speed. Slowking is probably going to be min speed, same with Snorlax, and then Sentret is a Sentret. You're going to invest in what, HP and nothing, and then click Endeavor. I don't know. um, Overall, I think the team is pretty strong. It, this is going to be the trend for the entire video. I need to see it in action because just looking at it, I don't know what's going on. Um, I will say, like, I am doubling down on, I don't think Dragapult first pick is the best, especially it was what, third pick overall. Um, I think just being weak to Sucker Punch, and that kind of applies to Golden Go as well. From the last team, being weak to Sucker Punch in this format feels really bad. Um, and maybe it won't be like as big of a deal once the games actually start. But to me, like, I was so worried about drafting like Ghost and Psychic type Pokemon because I just didn't want to get hit by Sucker Punch all the time. Um, that I guess, I don't know, maybe that was an oversight in my analysis of the format. Alright, next, the person who swiped Garchomp from me because I wanted Garchomp very badly. Um, Theo. This team is pretty strong. The Fairy Dragon Steel Core is like pretty nice. With like Garchomp, Azu, Magnezone. Um, Magnezone, I don't know how I feel about Magnezone, to be honest. It was something that I had considered drafting and decided not to. Um, just because like I think the speed tier is really awkward, and it being weak to ground is a big deal to me. Um, but I'm it's super strong. It's, I believe, the second strongest steel type in the format, only to Golden Go. Um, or the second strongest special attacking steel type to Golden Go. I don't know. Kilowattrel's really good. Next to Garchomp, it gives you like Disc Wake stuff. Sneasel, I love Sneasel. It has beat up, which is not going to be relevant for this team, but it's a fast speed abuser. Inner Focus is a really nice ability that Weavile doesn't have access to. Um, and it's one of those like not evolved Pokemon that will probably never run Eviolite, which is nice, especially when you have the Gothorita that's definitely going to want it. Um, but that being said, like I don't know what the Gothorita is really doing. Obviously, the Azumarill has Perish Song, so there's like a little bit of a mode here, but this team is like so frail that you're not really gonna be able to get away with a lot of the like Perish stuff unless it's one of those like I've already taken 2 KOs, I just click Perish Song and then sort of protect every other turn to win. But if that's the case, then you don't need Gothorita. So I don't fully understand the Gothorita. Um, I'll I hate slacking in draft. I think Weezing slacking is like no disrespect. Weezing slacking is like a noob trap in every aspect of Pokemon to me because Weezing becomes useless if the slacking is knocked out first, and slacking becomes useless if the Weezing is knocked out first. So like you have to manage both of them and like set yourself up so that if they're going to get KO'd, they both get KO'd at the same time. And it's just such like a difficult thing to manage, in my opinion, that it's like your payoff is that you get to use slacking, which it's really strong. That's cool. It has a really high base stat total. That's cool. But I don't think it's really worth as much as you have to commit. Um, and that's another thing that I could be proven wrong. But I personally do not value like slacking. And this is coming from somebody who was a Regigigas player in Sword and Shield. I do not like slacking. Um, I forget where I was. I went on a rant. Oh, Typhlosion. Yeah. Typhlosion is another Pokemon that it's weak to Sucker Punch. Um, and there's no redirection at all on this team, I believe. Yeah, there's no redirection. There's 3 fake outs because Hitmontop, Gothorita, and Sneasel. But Gothorita's losing to Dark types still, so it's not super great. And Sneasel is Sneasel. So, like, your only real defense against Dark types, like threatening Sucker Punches on Typhlosion, is like Azumarill and then Hitmontop. I assume that would be enough if you're, well positioned, but I guess we'll have to find out. I could count Wheezing, but I'm not going to. It is nice that Typhlosion like has a usable ability in draft because of Frisk, and Frisk on Typhlosion I think is a little teeny bit more valuable than it is on the Sentret. Um, but outside of that, like I don't know. I maybe I am just too worried about Sucker Punch. I guess we'll have to find out. Um, Garchomp is great. I talked about it a little bit. You can Earthquake next to the Kilowattrel, which is nice. You can also just run Weezing with Levitate instead of Neutralizing Gas, and then you have 2 Pokemon that you can Earthquake next to. Um, one thing that you do have to be careful about, and I assume this is something that Theo would know, is like if you're using Arboliva with Seed Sower, you can't really Earthquake with Garchomp because you're cutting the power in half. But I don't see why you would ever bring those two in the same week unless it's like 2 completely different strategies. Um, and I guess the other thing is like I think Weezing can kind of get in the way of like a lot of Pokemon on this team. Like if you end up in a position where like it's Azumarill and Weezing on the field together, like Azumarill is basically useless because you deactivate Huge Power. Garchomp doesn't really care about its abilities. I think it's kind of fine without Rough Skin. Same thing with Typhlosion. Like Frisk will activate once and then it doesn't matter anymore. Kilowattrel, like all of these abilities are pretty relevant. Hitmontop, Intimidate is definitely relevant, and Technician is obviously relevant. Shadow Tag is like super super relevant. Arboliva is Arboliva. Who cares? Um, Magnezone, I don't know. I guess it would depend on like if you've taken damage and you have sturdy, then you don't have an ability, so who cares? And magnet pull is also something that's like probably not super relevant. Um, what steel types are you trapping? I guess that it would be relevant because you can't trap gold and go, which is the first thing that came into my head. Who cares? And then obviously slacking needs neutralizing gas to like be a Pokemon. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think the Fairy Dragon Steel Core is pretty nice. That was the first thing that stood out to me. And then the Firewater Grass Core is solid. I think your grass is a little bit lacking. This is the first team that doesn't have a weakness to ground, I think, which is pretty cool. And there's actually no types that this team is weak to, or has more weaknesses to the type than resistances. It's either even or positive, which is that's great, obviously. Um, but I still think this team is susceptible to like getting kind of overwhelmed by fast offense. Even though there are fast Pokemon and Kilowattrel can set like Tailwind and all that stuff. Um, I think like one Choice Scarf Pokemon that you don't expect kind of like blows up your Garchomp or blows up your Typhlosion, and then you lose a lot of your power and you can kind of get out of position. Um, because like the defensive pieces of the team are not particularly there. Um, right? It's what like Arboliva, Magnezone, and Hitmontop are your defensive pieces, and I guess Azumarill can be, but it probably doesn't want to be. Um, and they all have like pretty defined weaknesses. Uh, there's like the fire weakness is like a little bit tricky, but I don't think it's that bad when you have Garchomp and Azumarill. Oh yeah, and one of the weaknesses is Sneasler, so never mind, or Sneasel, so never mind. Let me take the Sneasel out of here. Yeah, so the base stat total, pretty evenly distributed. Um, if you take the Sneasel out, honestly, do I have to take the Gothorita out too? Yeah, I don't know. I think that like skews it too much. The speed tiers are pretty nice. I'm starting to hit the crash. I can like feel myself crashing, and I'm on the fourth one of 13. I'm gonna I'm gonna power through. Um, Kilowattrel 125. Excuse me. I talked about it with Weavile. Like having 125 is super nice, especially when it can set Tailwind. Sneasel's speed is nice as well. I believe it has Icy Wind, so you get like a little bit of extra speed control. Garchomp being over base 100 is great. Slacking, it's base 100, cool. Um, but again, you like need so much going for it that I personally am not a believer. Typhlosion is similar to like the Toxtricity. It's probably going to be choice like every week. It's either going to be Scarf if you're not running Tailwind, or it'll be Specs if you are. Hitmontop doesn't care about its speed. Weezing doesn't particularly care about its speed. Same with like Magnezone. Gothorita is never going to run speed investment. Azu is most likely never going to run speed investment, and then Arboliva will probably be geared more towards Trick Room anyway. But you do have the nice ladder of 125 all the way down to basically 40. So that's the range is great, and I think that's all I have to say. Oh, you do have wide guard support. That is something else. Hitmontop has wide guard, so that something. And now I'm moving on. Next is Jake's draft. I think this draft is very good. I think that generally everybody would probably agree that the draft is pretty good. Um, he went with a similar strategy that I ended up getting in terms of just like get the Firewater Grass Core right away. And I believe he did that for the last draft as well. Because I think he went like no, he didn't get his water if I'm remembering correctly. He got like Rilla Instant and then something else that I don't remember, but it wasn't Blastoise, which was his initial water. Either way, it's either the best or second best Fire Water Grass core in the format. Um, there's no Fairy type, or no, that's not true. There's Primarina. The Fantasy core is good. I think Goodra as your dragon is maybe a little bit underwhelming, but it's a Goodra. Like it's still a 600 base stat total pseudo legendary. It's a good Pokemon. Um, Primarina is a great fairy. I don't know how I forgot that Primarina was a fairy type. And then Corviknight as your steel is awesome. Having a steel that's immune to ground is great. Um, Mudsdale as your ground, it's cool. It's really strong. Um, I don't believe there's really easy ways to activate stamina, like to self-activate stamina. Because what are you gonna bullet seed yourself with Rillaboom? Probably not. Um, but I think that's fine. Honestly, it would be kind of cool to pick up a beat up user because then you get like the justified stuff with Arcanine and also you can self proc stamina. But I don't. I think Umbreon as your dark type is like just really good to have. It's like that defensive piece that the team already has like such good defensive typing synergy, but if you want a Pokemon that can just like switch in and sponge a hit, Umbreon is probably one of the best there is. Um, you also have like a really good Trick Room mode in you can like have Slowking set it up with the Electivire redirection or like fake out with Rillaboom, and then you have a pretty good sweeper in either Mudsdale or Conkeldurr. Um, and the entire team is pretty slow, right? The fastest thing being under base 100 is I think a little bit tricky. Um, but it's a balanced team, so like the speed isn't a huge deal, most likely, because you can just like pivot and stall your way around. Um, yeah, I Electivire is the redirector. I think it's pretty good synergy because right, you're redirecting, electric moves from Primarina, which Electivire doesn't mind. Um, I guess there's like the little bit of anti-synergy with Arcanine and like redirecting a ground weak into a ground weak, but you also have Rillaboom, so you don't have to worry about like Earthquake kind of breaking your team. Um, and you have Corviknight too, so like ground types are not especially like strong into the team, despite it showing up on here as like a higher weakness count than resist. And the ice weakness, who cares? There's like two ice types that got drafted. It doesn't matter. um, what else? It's just a good team. Like I feel like there's not anything like really crazy to talk about. It's just a good team. Like all the Pokemon are strong and they work with each other. And that's just like how Jake drafts. Makes sense. Um, I guess like something that's maybe relevant is like there's a little bit of a lack of special attackers. Like Primarina is your only like focused special attacker. I guess there's a Slowking too, but whatever. Um, so it's another team where like maybe the Iron Defense Body Press Pokemon are gonna give you trouble, but setup in general I think is not that strong into this team because like you can just intimidate cycle it if it's a physical attacker or like yawn with Umbreon to require it to like phase out. Um, so yeah, it's just a good draft. There's not a ton to say, but it's a good draft. And we're moving on. Next is Ronald. So I had a like decent. I don't know exactly the way I want to describe it. I was uh, on the council of this team. Um, no, that's the wrong one. Ronald and I were talking as the draft was going on, and we agreed that Archaludon was probably the best Pokemon in the draft, and that it was not going to get to 6. And then as we were talking about how it wouldn't get to 6, it got down to 6, which is ridiculous. And then the fact that Mousehold made it through back to him is just like these two alone, I think, are just such a like imposing thing in preview that you have to prep for it. Um, and I've already talked about like two teams that are maybe a little bit weak to body press stuff, and this is probably one of the more like prominent body press Pokemon in the format. Um, of course, there's like the Pelipper so that you get the rain mode. Florges is something that I was pushing pretty hard for because of like all the cool stuff you can do with Symbiosis. So you can like run Electro Shot outside of rain and consume the Power Herb and then Symbiosis a Assault Vest to yourself, which is really fun. Um, and then also like if it's not on this team, but Flower Veil, like if you had a physical grass type, Flower Veil protects it from Intimidate, which is really cool. Um, I'm not counting Electrode as a physical grass type, for the record. Overquill as your Swift Swimmer is cool. I think having a actual like water type Swift Swimmer would have been nice. I like he had been talking about getting Basculegion. I think the round that it was taken, so that kind of stinks. But I think you're kind of fine, right? Samurott is going to be good at abusing the rain because you get like sharpness boosted and rain boosted like razor shells and stuff. That's terrifying. Um, why does it? Oh, because it's not gender split. Um, Meowstic is cool. I really enjoyed having Meowstic last season. I think it does a lot of like really cool things that you would want a Prankster user to do. Um, and I assume this was some aspect of inspiration of me like using uh, Prankster Psychic Terrain with like expanding force on Iron Crown, which is the reason for getting the Armarouge. Um, and also Wide Guard is nice. Um, I think Armarouge is kind of like the one that's out of place the most, but there are certain matchups where rain just like sucks and you can just bring Armarouge instead, which is great. And then, oh, I guess there is a strong physical grass type in Decidueye, but it doesn't really care about Intimidate because it's going to be scrappy anyway. But I don't know. Decidueye is also cool. It's I think one of two scrappy fighting types in the format, the other being Flamigo. Um, and Scrappy is just a really nice ability to have, especially with no Terra, because then like the Ghost type can't Terra out of getting hit by your fighting moves, which is kind of weird. Um, it's just like a rain team that has like an extra mode, basically. Um, I think a lot of the like value picks are really good. I think Electrode is a really good pickup, because it's the fastest Pokemon in the format. It has like Electro Web and Speed Control and all that stuff. There's a bunch of tricks you can do with like it has Rain Dance. It has like Bullet Seed to self proc the body press, like all that stuff. So I think Electrode is gonna maybe see more play than we might expect. Um, and then it's another thing of like I would expect to see like Archalot on Mousehold pretty much every week, and then probably Pelipper every week. And then you just sort of pick your three favorite guys for the matchup, and then hope that Archaludon wins for you. Um, the one like kind of weakness of the Archaludon Mousehold pairing is that they're both weak to fighting, and you can't like Terra Ghost Mousehold anymore, um, because Terra is banned. So a really strong fighting type, I think, is going to give this team a little bit of trouble, especially when like Florges and Pelipper are your ways to deal with it, and they're pretty slow. Um, I guess I should say your primary, because you can use Meowstic and Armarouge as well, but Meowstic is weak as hell, and Armarouge is still relatively slow. Um, the speed tiers are pretty nice. This jump, the one problem with this jump is that it's so significant that like all the Weaviles and stuff like that, like they know they can't outspeed Electrode, so they only have to run enough speed to outspeed Mousehold. But I don't think there's really any Pokemon that are that valuable between these two that like it would be worth getting to like force that bump in speed. So it's not a huge deal. Meowstic speed stat is like kind of irrelevant. It's mostly going to be clicking prankster stuff anyway. Like you occasionally are going to click psychic into a super effective target to get like 40% chip. Great. Um, and then Overquill as well is doubling its speed in rain, so that's another speed set that's like not super relevant. I think Samurott is probably going to be scarfed a lot, because I think that's sort of its primary weakness is like it's pretty strong with sharpness, and then you just get like blasted by a moonblast or like hit by a fast fighting type like CC or something and just get knocked out. But excuse me, if you're scarf, it's not. You at least get your one hit before. Yeah, and then these ones don't really care about their speed stat. I guess Pelipper like kind of does. Um, you have the Tailwind with the Pelipper. You have Trick Room with the Armarouge, and the Meowstic, and then Electrode is also great speed control, so that's pretty nice. Um, in terms of the weaknesses, it's again you have a ground weakness, but I don't think it's that huge of a deal. It's only 3, and you're a rain team, so like you have tools to deal with it. Um, and then what? Poison. Who cares? It doesn't really matter. And then Fairy is like semi-relevant, but there's only 2 that are weak to Fairy anyway, so like again, it's not a huge deal. Um, I think it's a strong team. I think it has the like potential to be one note. Um, like there is the other mode of the Psy Spam of Meowstic and Armarouge, but I think it's just generally weaker than your Rain mode, so there might be like some matchups where you go, Rain's not the best, but it's like my Rain mode is so much stronger than my Psy Spam mode that it just makes more sense to bring the Rain and then try to play better. Um, but again, that's something that I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Which is that's the like slogan of this recording. I've been talking for an hour. Oh my god. I'm definitely not doing Miraidon after this. Alright, I'm going to try to speed it up a little bit. Next is ZL. Basket Legion. Squawkabilly Blue. Tauros. Blaze. Why did Squawkabilly... Don't give me the option. Squawkabilly. Okay. Alright. This team is interesting. First 2 picks are crazy. And Basket Legion also is crazy. I think like the lower picks drop off crazy though. Like these 3 Pokemon, I don't know how often they're gonna ever get used. Thwacky, I don't really understand the value of the Thwacky, to be totally honest, because there's nothing on this team that really benefits from grassy terrain, and like Thwacky on its own is not crazy valuable. I guess like it does open up like grassy seed tricks that you can do, but outside of that, like it's not super great, and you don't even have like a unburdened Pokemon that you can pair it with. Squawkabilly is a scam. it doesn't do anything. It's like all of its stats are just not enough. It like has to run Choice Scarf every week. You're probably running Final Gambit, but it only has 82 base HP, so like you're missing a lot of one-hit KOs that you probably want. I don't know. It just doesn't have like the staying power. It has 51 in both of its defenses. Like it's so bad. I guess it's nice. Like it's an Intimidator, but you already had an Intimidator in Tauros, and Tauros is just way better. Um, and then like the other thing that really stood out to me, like while I'm on the topic of the Tauros, is like there's so many double typings here that I think are just unnecessary. Like normal here does not matter at all because these Pokemon are so broken. Like oh no, they're both getting hit by, or then they're not even getting hit by fighting because Farigiraf is neutral. Who cares, right? Like this doesn't matter. But then double fire on like Salazzle and Tauros, I don't think you needed it. I don't think it was that big of a deal. And then like Thwacky and Shiftry are they do the same thing to me. They're both like clicking decently strong like grass moves. Shiftry is just better, I think. Um, if there was like an unburdened Pokemon that could use the grassy terrain, I would say like keep Thwacky and like throw Shiftry out, but I don't understand the value of the Thwacky, and I think Shiftry has like way more things that it can do because I believe there's like 4 Tailwind Pokemon on this team, right? Because it's Vivian, Hydreigon, Squawk, and Shiftry can all set Tailwind, so you're pretty easily going to be getting Wind Rider if you want it. Um, yeah, I don't know. Um, I mean, I'm not going to hate on Salazzle because reference, but I don't think it was exactly the right pick on this team. There's the fun synergy you can do of like Salazzle has Dragon Cheer, and you can Dragon Cheer your Hydreigon, so you don't have to do Focus Energy. You can just start clicking Draco Meteor right away. Um, but I don't know if spending like what it was like 9 points for Salazzle. Yeah, I don't know if spending 9 points for that one thing was like super worth it. It has Fake Out too, which is great. It's a really fast Fake Out, and it's it's your fastest Pokemon on your team, and it's a pretty strong like special attacker. But you have Blood Moon, Ursaluna, and Hydreigon already for special attackers. You don't need another one. Um, and like I mean, Farigiraf like kind of yeah it's basically as strong as Salazzle. Um, I think what I maybe would have preferred to see like for the Salazzle is maybe you just try to find like a decent Steel type or a Fairy. Um, because you don't have either of those types, which is, I think that's a pretty big deal. Um, and then like speaking of Hydreigon, it's just gonna get sniped by fairies sometimes. I think you kind of have to accept that. Like you do have redirection in the Vivian, um, and I think Vivian is a really good partner for Ursaluna, but it is a better partner for the Facade Ursaluna because you can Earthquake next to your own Vivian. Um, it doesn't really matter with Ursaluna Blood Moon because you're clicking Earth Power, which isn't spread anyway. Um, the other thing is like Basculegion. I'm gonna again reiterate like the Sucker Punch problem. Um, this team has like more tools to get around it because you have the Farigiraf for priority blocking and you have the Vivian for redirection. Um, but none of those Pokemon really want to get hit by dark moves, and like Vivian's special attack is not strong enough that I think it's really threatening all the dark types. You do have the Tauros, of course, so that like you can just click close combat into all the dark types that are trying to sucker punch you. But when you only have the one Pokemon that really deals with dark types, and Basculegion is like your premier physical attacker, I think again getting kind of like jailed by sucker punch is really scary. Um, and then your other two physical attackers, or I guess there's 3 more in total. I'm not counting Squawkabilly. Squawkabilly is ass. But like your Shiftry and your I guess Thwacky, and then the Tauros. So like Tauros is your sort of premier like solution to the dark types, and then obviously if there's no dark type or like the dark type is KO'd, then Basculegion goes insane. Um, but it's one of those things where like I just would not be comfortable like getting jailed by Sucker Punch. I think is really what it comes down to. I also think like Basculegion on this team is a little weird because you're in order to like be outputting like Basculegion level damage, you have to run adaptability because you don't have a rain setter. Um, if there was a rain setter, then I think Basculegion would be a lot better. But the fact that you're locked into adaptability, like probably Choice Scarf almost every week, isn't the best. And it's also like, even though you have 4 Tailwind setters, like your fastest Tailwind setter is Hydreigon at 98, which means even like non-Prankster Tailwind from a lot of Pokemon are moving first, and then they're just outspeeding you with the rest of your team, and there's a chance that you just don't get your Tailwind. Um, so that's something that you have to keep in mind. But like at the end of the day, are you really gonna be using Tailwind that much when you have just like this strong of a Trick Room mode? Um, I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. I'm gonna say it so many times. We'll just have to wait and see. Um, I guess that is one other thing is like if you set up Trick Room and then Ursaluna gets KO'd, you're not the happiest because like those are your only two like really slow Pokemon. Um, Having like this is one aspect of my draft that I am considering like making a change to if it becomes a problem, but like having one Pokemon below base 60 speed, especially when it wants to be in Trick Room, is it can be tricky because like sometimes your opponent will just have like the Arboliva from I think the previous team or like two teams ago, or like the Conkeldurr on Jake's team is like they just bring that, and then if you set Trick Room up, they go into whatever, and they just deal with their Saluna, and then they're in a better position in your Trick Room than you are, which is bad. Also similar to my team, like having your only redirection be Rage Powder means that if there's a Pokemon that like beats the rest of your team but loses to Vivian, they can just put safety goggles on, and then it's not a problem anymore. Um, but other than that, it's a good team. They're all the teams are good. I think all the teams are things that like I assume that the person who drafted it is happy with it because why would you draft it otherwise? Um, and there's obviously things that like they are seeing that I am not because they've spent more time like I would assume they've spent more time like thinking about the sort of inner workings and little like hyper niche synergies that I'm not going to see on like a surface level look through. So there might be some like really good justification for Thwacky that I just am not seeing, and if that's the case, then I'm wrong, and I'm not gonna like argue about it. But to me, I don't see the Thwacky. I don't understand the Thwacky. Right. Um, the speed tiers are pretty good. I think the base set total gets like dragged down pretty heavy, and like it's not even one where it's like, oh, they drafted some like random 1 point Pokemon that drags the BST down. Like all these Pokemon just have like low base set totals. Like Squawkabilly and Vivian have horrible base set totals. Um, yeah, and Thwacky too. Why does Thwacky have a higher base set total than Squawkabilly, man? Whatever. All right. Next team, Token Sun team. There's always got to be one. Um, I I think this is my least favorite team because I just don't fuck with Sun. Um, but Sun players got to do their thing, and who am I to stop you? I guess. Um, I think the thing that stands out to me the most on this team is there's like a lot of repetitive types. Um, like I don't see the reason to have both Venusaur and Amoonguss on the same team because they are basically the same Pokemon. They just move at different speeds. Um, or I guess I shouldn't say that. They function very similarly. They are sleepers that are grass and poison type, and that's it. Venusaur is significantly better in Sun. I actually think like Amoonguss in Sun is not great because it means that like even the less offensive like fire types can just like pick Amoonguss off and you can't Terra to get out of the weakness. Um, there's only Amoonguss for redirection, which again I've brought up like having Rage Powder as your only redirection is a little bit scary. Or I guess there's Volcarona with Rage Powder as well, but you still have only Rage Powder for redirection. Um, and additionally, like a lot of the team is weak to fire on a Sun team, which is kind of scary. Um, or I guess not a lot, but like a lot of your prevalent Pokemon are either weak or neutral to fire on a Sun team. Um, the Torkoal. I don't know if the Torkoal is like well supported enough. You don't have an after you user, so you can't like sort of like immediately turn on the offense. Like Torkoal needs to be in Trick Room in order to click Eruption and all that stuff. And you can run like the supportive set with like body press and I think it was like overheat eject pack and stuff. Um, but I would assume that you would want to get into Trick Room because you have like Amoonguss, Rhyperior, Bronzong, Hisui, and Braviary. Typically is probably gonna want to be in Trick Room. I assume. I don't know what it's really doing. And the Golurk, like when I'm looking at the speed tiers, the fact that like the middle speed tier is 65 is kind of crazy. Your fastest Pokemon is Volcarona. It is a Tailwind setter. That's nice. And also like Venusaur is doubling its speed in the sun, so that's good. But the team is really slow, and the fact that you like don't really have guaranteed ways to get Trick Room up because Rage Powder is your only form of redirection, and there are no fake outs on this entire team. I think there's gonna be a lot of players who like solve Trick Room, like they just prevent you from getting Trick Room, and then they just beat up on your team. Um, I'm trying to see like if there are really anything you can do to like prevent it, right? It's like I guess you just have to like run Mental Herb on your Bronzong and hope. Uh, I don't know. Also, I believe Bronzong is the only Trick Room setter. Is that true? Oops. Yeah, it is. So that's also a big like point of linearity. I think that is going to be pretty exploitable. Um, you have two ground types in the Crook and the Rhyperior. They're both really good. Although I again think there's a little bit of overlap there that maybe isn't necessary. It's just a difference in like how fast they're moving. Um, I think if I personally had this team and I was going to keep one, I would get rid of Rhyperior. Um, Especially because like Lightning Rod doesn't do anything. There's only one Pokemon that's weak to Electric on your entire team. Oh wait, there's three ground types. I forgot Golurk was a ground type. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of overlap. Um, a lot of overlap. And you can see here, like also like this water weakness is like super prevalent. Um, yes, Amoonguss can like redirect, and also you have the sun, so you're reducing the damage. But if you just override the sun and give your water type safety goggles, then you're taking giant knockouts on over half of the team. Um, so that's something that you have to keep in mind as well. Then the ice weakness again, who cares? There's like two ice types. Ground weakness is decently relevant. Um, Venusaur is going to help because it like threatens fast offense into ground types, but I don't know. The flying weakness I don't think is like super relevant. The ghost weakness also is not a huge deal, and the dark weakness is kind of the same. Yeah, I don't know. I just think this is the team to me that feels the least cohesive because, like, and this is the case for every Sun team. I've never seen a Sun team that I've been like satisfied with. Basically, I think there's too much overlap every time. Of like, I don't know. Every Sun team has like three fire types, and like four grass types, and it's just not like there needs to be some way that you can build a Sun team that is not reliant on Sun all the time. Because I feel like this team like has to bring Torkoal to every match. And if you're in a position where you have to bring one Pokemon in order for the rest of your team to like work, that's really scary because if that one Pokemon has a bad matchup, then your whole team basically has a bad matchup. Um, I don't know. I'm sure there are workarounds, right? Like Torkoal obviously is not required for every single match, but I think for the team to be at its strongest, you need Torkoal. Um, and more specifically, you need the Sun or Trick Room. So yeah, I guess it'll be like if you can beat Torkoal and Bronzong, then you're probably gonna beat the team. Is how it looks in my head, and I don't think I play against this person. Do I? I do not. Oh well. But yeah, I don't know. This team feels the 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 most exploitable, I guess is the best way to put it. Next would be my team. Go watch my solo video that I made about my team if you want to hear me talk about my own team. Next is Oog, big Oog. This is the Dozo Giri team. I do not fuck with Dozo Giri either. I think, especially in this format, it is super shit. Because you can't Terra. Like, the reason that Dozo, I think, is, like, a functional Pokemon is because you have access to Terra. And the fact that you can't, like, Terra Grass to avoid, like, getting hit by Spore on a Moongus, or, like, Terra Steel to avoid a Clear Smog, and, like, all that stuff is, like, so awful. Um, it also means that, like, any fast Grass type or any fast Electric type is hitting you for, like, 60%, even if you're boosted, which stinks. Um, I will say, like, getting Meowscarada on a Dozo team is a really nice pickup for two reasons. Because one, you get Meowscarada, which is awesome. And then two, you prevent somebody else from getting Meowscarada, which is like a one-stop solution to Dondozo. um, but I just think like Dozo Giri is such like an exploitable strategy when you know it's coming that it's just so hard to like make it effective to me. Um, Again, right? I guess we'll see, but I'm not a believer. Um, and then the rest of the team is basically just like, what if I had every super strong physical attacker, right? Because you have Baxcalibur, which Baxcalibur with the snow and like the Aurora Veil is going to be really scary, like especially the loaded dice like Icicle Spear, Scale Shot sets. Um, but I think Baxcalibur is another Pokemon that like really is going to miss Terra because sometimes it's just going to get sniped by a fairy type. Like, that's just how it is. Um, I don't believe there's any redirection on this team. I don't think Ribombee has Rage Powder. It does not. So yeah, there's no redirection on the entire team. You do have Fake Out with Palmot, but that's really it for like Disruption. And then the rest of it is just, strong physical attackers. Um, when your strongest special attacker is Tatsugiri, I think that can be a little bit scary. Especially when it's your strongest by like 30 points. Yeah, geez, your second tied for second strongest special attacker is Hisui Arcanine. That's pretty rough. Um, yeah, I mean, you have the Palmot for like revival blessing stuff, which is cool. Um, I thought there was the Fairy Dragon Steel Core, but there's no Steel type. Yeah, and you have two fairies that are both like not really that offensive, which is a little bit tricky. Ribombe's interesting. It's not 125, so you're gonna lose to like the Weaviles and Kilowattrels in the format. But it does set Tailwind, which is nice. It also has Pollen Puff, which is pretty cool. Um, I guess if you like wanted to run Intimidate and like um, Head Smash on your Arcanine, you can like Pollen Puff it back up. Um, Also, like a nice little synergy is you can, instead of running the fusion, you just use Tatsugiri with Storm Drain to protect your Arcanine, which is pretty nice. Um, and then outside of that, I guess this is pretty big, right? The really relevant weakness of fighting. Um, The other weaknesses are not. Yeah, I guess this is also pretty important, right? Having 4 fairy weaknesses and only 1 resist in your Arcanine. That can be pretty tricky, I think. This is another team that I think is maybe a little bit exploitable, because if you deal with the snow and you deal with Dondozo, like, there's not a lot left. I don't know. This kind of team is something that, like, I personally would not want to draft, because I think it is very reliant on, like, one Pokemon every week. Like, you're probably choosing when you go into prep of, like, I want Dozo to win, or I want either, like, Baxcalibur or, like, Meowscarada to win. Um, so then, like, the rest of your prep would revolve around, like, okay, what do I need to remove in order for Dondozo to win? Like, what can I use to get rid of that Pokemon that's preventing Dondozo to win? And I think that, like, type of gameplay is really scary, because if one thing goes wrong and, like, your solution to their Dozo answer gets KO'd before you can deal with the Dozo answer, you just, like, can't win the game. Um, yeah, it's pretty tricky. Uh, and there's also Sawsbuck. I don't know. Sawsbuck is fun. You can do Serene Grace Headbutt for 60% flinch chance. That can win you a game, I guess. Um, the Sap Sipper's not super relevant. Like, it's good for Dondozo, but if Dondozo's fused, you can't even pivot out, so it doesn't matter. And then there's not a single other grass weakness. I don't know. It's interesting, but I'm not a huge believer. I'll have to be convinced. All right, next, Rockwell's team. I think this is one of the scarier teams in the league. Um, it's another team that I think, like, started off as kind of like, let me just get scary shit. Getting Ursaluna as your first pick already sets you off in, like, a really good spot, because you have, like, probably the premier physical ground type in the format. Um, I do think, like, that Ursaluna can, like, kind of suffer from being kind of linear. Because if you want to, like, right, I said this with Basculegion as well. Like, if you want to be doing Ursaluna levels of damage, you have to be Guts. Um, or you can do Belly Drum, but it's not as, like, simple, I guess would be the best way to put it. But that being said, I think this team is, like, really good at supporting Ursaluna. Right, you have Magmar for redirection, which is really strong. Um, it does, like, have that, tricky, like, redirecting a water type super effective hit into a super effective target, which is a little bit, like, tricky, but I think it's manageable. And then you also have, like, Komodo Magmar in Season 1 for Gurdonai was, like, the most broken thing ever. It's weaker without Terra, because a lot of the times, like, the way that we would build our lead for Como Magmar was, like, one of the two is clicking Terra, depending on what we see, and then we just go from there. Like, we could basically flowchart everything. Not having the ability to Terra means that you kind of leave Magmar open to, like, just getting blown up by a strong ground hit, and then Como becomes exposed to, all the fairy hits and all that stuff. But you also have, like, the screen support for it, and Intimidate with Gyarados and stuff like that. Oranguru is really cool to pair next to Ursaluna, because you can beat Telepathy to be immune to the Earthquake, and then just instruct it to do it again. And I think the team is just really, like, fun. There's a lot of Pokemon on here that I have drafted or used in the past that are just cool, except for Grimmsnarl and Gyarados. Fuck those guys. um, but, like, I don't know. It's just a scary team. Um, like, this is, I think, a well executed version of, like, I want a win con. Of, like, you can pretty reasonably just say, like, I want Ursaluna to win this week, and then what do I need to do to let Ursaluna win? And you go, okay, I'm gonna bring, like, Magmar, Grimmsnarl, and Oranguru, and then I'm just gonna click, like, Earthquake with Ursaluna every turn, and probably twice a turn with Oranguru, and then I'll just win. Or you go, alright, I'm gonna click like Iron Defense with Komo and just like body press everything to death, and I can support it with Magmar and like Comfy. Great. Um, so there's a lot of like really tricky things you have to maneuver in terms of just like not getting win conned immediately. um, Ursaluna also, like, even outside of the Oranguru, like, you have so many Pokemon that you can click Earthquake next to, right? Because you have Ursaluna and Gyarados, Ursaluna and Yanmega, Ursaluna and Oranguru, like I mentioned. You can probably Earthquake next to Abomasnow. I don't think it'll take very much damage with, like, it's a resisted hit and also um, the Snow defense boost. I don't think it's something you would really want to do, but you could. Um, Frostmoth definitely is not taking a Guts boosted Earthquake. Um, yeah. The speed tiers, again, Comfy being your fastest is a little bit rough. Especially when you don't have any like Slush Rush users. Um, but you know, you have Prankster Speed Control and Grimmsnarl. Comfy has Trick Room and Tailwind. Yanmega has Speed Boost, so that's something that you can like use to sort of tip the scales for you. Como can set up in like 500 different ways and boosted speed if it wants. Gyarados can Dragon Dance, like Frostmoth can Quiver Dance. So there's a lot of ways to gain a speed advantage, but you won't like start out with one. Um, and like I mentioned with the Blood Moon Ursaluna team, like if you set up Trick Room and you're like expecting Ursaluna to like just sort of be around for the whole Trick Room and it's not, that can be a little tricky because you have like all of these like slightly above average speed Pokemon. But I think this draft is a little bit like less susceptible to it when you have like all these base 60s. I did not mean to select Gyarados. Like all of these. Um, Although to be fair, like they aren't necessarily sweepers, right? So like I'm not particularly scared of Abomasnow in Trick Room. I guess outside of like Blizzard freezes. I don't know. Yeah, I just gotta move on. All right, Curry Puff. I hate this team because it has the Smeargle and Muck, but outside of that, like it's kind of fun. So what can you do? I stole low kicks. My bad, I guess. I don't know. Um, yeah. So let's talk about this. Smeargle is like just the jack of all trades in draft, right? That's like what it's supposed to do. Um, I think in this format, Smeargle honestly kind of sucks because you just get hit with a fake out on turn one and then get hit by something else on turn two and then you're dead and you didn't accomplish anything. Um, and then like it requires you to click like protect on turn one and then you're, you know, forced to double protect because you don't just want to get like blown up on the partner slot and like all that stuff. Like I think you just have to play like so many kind of unnecessary mind games where if you could be Terra Ghost and like just circumvent the fake out and then like immediately decorate your Metagross and something like that, like that's super scary. And in theory, you can do that with like Covert Cloak, but Smeargle has like 10 defense or something. Yeah, 30, 35 and 45. So like you're taking like 20% from the fake out and then probably getting KO'd by the follow up. Um, so I don't know. But outside of like the cheese mode, right, of the Smeargle and Mug, you have like Annihilate plus the beat up on Whimsicott, which is really interesting. You also have like the Prankster like Sunny Day next to the Solar Power Charizard, which is going to be really scary. Um, and then you have Gastrodon to like protect your Charizard. Um, which I think is like the only, yeah, it's the only water weakness. So like maybe it was a little bit um unnecessary to get Gastrodon if like the intention was for Storm Drain, but Gastrodon offers a ton of other things anyway, so it'll be fine. Um, Bellybolt is really cool in draft. Like Electromorphosis, I think is an ability that people don't like fully understand, but there's a lot of like really tricky things you can do, and also like having, you know, you have two ground types here, so you can like parabolic charge a bunch, and there's a chance that Belly Bolt just becomes like unkillable. Um, Zoroark Kasui is like a really tricky, like annoying Pokemon. So like if you just want to try to cheese, like you can just lead like I guess like a Zoroark disguised as Smeargle, so they waste their fake out and then go from there. Um, yeah, it's a team that I think there's like a lot of tools. I just don't know how like I don't know how well they're gonna match with each other. Um, and I think the team could get devolved into like it has to rely on cheese in certain matchups to win, which is not the best. Um, but I guess at the end of the day, a win is a win, so who really cares? Um, it's just one of those things where it's like the partners are pretty defined, right? Like Annihilate and Whimsicott want to be on the field next to each other. I guess you also have to worry about like beat up into weakness policy Metagross and stuff like that. Um, I was watching, I think it was Ronald's Koraidon video and like Koraidon draft analysis, and he was talking about like electromorphosis triggering multiple times. That's not how it works. Um, electromorphosis will trigger. It gives you the charge effect, which means it doubles your next electric move, um, but it doesn't stack. So you have to expand the charge. You have to expel the charge in order to get another one. Um, although I do think it would pop up as the ability triggering every time that you hit a beat up into Belly Bolt, but it does not like give you 8 times strong electric moves because that would be insane. Um, it only doubles it the one time, and then you have to use it and then get a new one. Um, is there? Let's see, anything else? Having Stantler for Intimidate is nice. It also has Trick Room. So you do have like an okay way to get into Trick Room, and also like if you don't want to run Intimidate because I don't know, like if your opponent has like King Gambit or something, you can just run Frisk, and then Frisk is nice. Um, Flygon, I know it was kind of like a panic pick, but I don't like Flygon that much because like it's kind of just average in like everything. Um, but honestly, like I just think that you don't need to bring it. I think the rest of the Pokemon are just good enough that you honestly don't really need Flygon in any matchups. Maybe? I don't know. I'm curious to see like what the team is gonna do. I think I also don't. Do I play Curry Puff? I have to keep checking this. I don't. Um. So yeah, I guess I will not experience the potential of Smeargle Muck firsthand, but it's like it's something that on paper you always have to respect, which is intimidating. It's like the same with the Annihilate and Whimsicott, where it's like if you're not prepped for it and it comes, then you just lose to it, and then you should have prepped better. um, I don't know. We'll see. I have to keep saying it, but yeah, we'll see. All right, moving on to Stout Gaming. So this team feels like another kind of just like thrown together team to me. I think like Tyranitar Sand Mode plus the Psy Spam is weird. I don't know really if I like the combination of the two because yeah, I don't know. Like one Dark type kind of messes it up. I guess you do have the like synergy of T-Tar being weak to fighting, and then you have like the fast, Psychic type in Delphox that can like fix the problem for you basically. Um, but yeah, I'm not like super sure on that combination. Um, I also just think like Spam in general is I think it's simultaneously better and worse in a no Terra format because it just means like your opponents can't just like spam Terra steals against you in order to like resist all the psychic moves. Um, but at the same time, like one dark type rocks your whole world because you can't Terra out of the weakness. Um, and this team is like it is a pretty relevant weakness, right? And Ghost as well. Um, where a lot of your like big hitters or important support pieces are getting hit by dark type damage for weakness, which is kind of scary. Um, and then what your I guess your solution is like the Hariyama and Hatterene to an extent. Um, which if you don't have Trick Room, that might not be enough. And then the Firewater Grass Cores is unique, I guess would be the best way to put it, right? Delphox, Rotom-Mow, and Milotic. Um, Milotic is a really interesting Pokemon in draft because it can do so many things, right? Like it can be like a Marvel Scale defensive set. You can just do like Coil Hypnosis with competitive and stuff like that. Um, but I think it like works better on more balanced teams because it might be tricky to like find a way to get the coils up outside of redirecting with Indeedee. Um, yeah, I don't know. I also think like it can be a little bit tricky because Hariyama is a really good like enabler of Trick Room, but if you wanted to set Trick Room up with Indeedee, you can't like fake out with Hariyama. Um, so there's a little bit of like anti synergy there. And in that case, you would like have to. It would probably have to be Hatterene that's setting Trick Room. Um, in that case, and then you have to like switch Hariyama out to like get the Psychic Terrain up for Hatterene to do like what it wants to do. So that might be like a little bit annoying. I also did not know that Delphox had Trick Room. Is that real, or is that the doc lying to me? Oh, it does. All right. Um, yeah. What else? Houndstone is scary. Even outside of Sand, like you can just run Fluffy and run a defensive set with like Will-O-Wisp and stuff, and it's really good. Um, I assume it will mostly be Sand Rush though. Um, Haxorus, it's just strong, right? Yeah, 147 attack. Scary. It has first impression, which is fun. Um, as a dragon type, I don't know how good it will be. It's like fast enough, probably, and definitely strong enough, but its bulk is a little bit lacking. And then Revavroom, I fuck with Revavroom heavy, especially on the sand team because you have like the overcoat, and I mean you're immune to the sand anyway because you're a steel type, but I fuck with Revavroom heavy. Um, it can do some funny stuff, but it is a ground weakness. It's a 4x ground weakness, which is tough. Um, the speed tiers are also a little bit tricky. Delphox is over 100, which is good, but it's not like super over 100. So again, like all those like 110s and 125s in the format are going to be faster than your whole team. Um, there's the Houndstone with Sandrush, but Houndstone's damage output without Last Respects being like at least like 150 base power is like honestly not the scariest thing in the world. Um, yeah. Is there anything else? The Drifblim is cool. The Drifblim is nice because it's you can unburden like proc it with the Psychic Seed into like Tailwind. So I guess maybe the speed's not as big of a deal. Um, but that requires a lot of setup, right? So it's like you need Indeedee on the field, Drifblim, you have to Tailwind, and then go into something that does actual damage, because it's not gonna be Drifblim, and it's definitely not gonna be Indeedee that are like outputting the damage really. Um, I guess like one other thing is like I mentioned with King Gambit, like T-Tar being 4x weak to fighting is a little bit like scary, but on this team I think it has like more tools to kind of remedy that because you have, three psychic types and fairy type and a ghost and all that stuff. Um, but yeah. And then the last one, Keon's team. I am I'm the most invested in Keon's team because I think Keon drafted in a very similar way that I drafted last season, and I'm curious if it will work out better for him than it did for me. Which I assume it will because he's better than I am at the game. Uh, but I guess we'll find out. Add it to the counter. Um, so this team is interesting. This is like a soft everything team is kind of the best way to explain it. Like there's a soft rain mode, there's a soft side spam mode, there's like a defensive like support plus setup mode with like shell smash on Torterra and stuff like that. Um, it's really like I think the draft was basically just like what if I got every budget Pokemon on the board that I could. Um, which again like that's what I kind of tried to do in season 2 and it worked out poorly. So I'm curious if it's like an actual strategy that is doable and I just did a bad job, or if it's just not a great strat. Um, there's a lot of Pokemon that are just like really good in draft on the team, right? Like Gallade is awesome, Gengar is awesome, Scizor is a LWDL champion, good Pokemon. Salamence is a great Pokemon. Um, it's just like I think it's a little scary when your most expensive pick is 15 because I get like flashbacks of my draft for season 2 again. Um, because I'm curious, like, what's the? I mean, yeah, the stats are good, right? Salaman's 135 attack, like it can be special too. Gengar's 130. There's a lot of really high like offensive stats here. Um, is there redirection? Yes, there's the follow me on Magmortar. Um, Indeedee has fake out, but it probably will never use it. Oh yeah, and I forgot Ludicolo had fake out as well. Yeah, it's a really interesting team. That's kind of the best way I can put it. Like looking at it, I feel like it is kind of a mess, but I can understand like the value in all the picks, and I just need to see like how they get paired with each other. Um, you have like probably the weirdest fantasy core in Salaman's Alchemy Scizor. Um, Salamence and Scizor are amazing, but Alchemy is probably a pretty questionable fairy type, especially um, when its like main thing is just buffing, um, your like ally Pokemon. It does have like a respectable special attack stat, but I guess it'll just come down to like if the matchup is fitting for it or not. Like if you can just sort of get away with clicking like Dazzling Gleam for the whole game. Um, I don't know. And then let's see. Like I don't Ludicolo, I don't know how I feel about it, especially as the fourth pick. I don't think it was like really required. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter like when you pick stuff. It's just like do you have it or not? But I do think maybe there was something more interesting or like more applicable that you could get instead of Ludicolo, especially if you had the plan of getting Torterra as your grass, you didn't need Ludicolo really, but I don't know. Um, yeah, it's an interesting. That's all I can really say. It's just it's interesting. Um, and I just want to see like how it works. The speed tiers are good. right? 110 on Gengar's nice. It's not. You would probably want. I think 125 is like a really good benchmark for like if your fastest Pokemon is 125 or above. I think that's like you're totally solid in your like upper speed tier. And then 110 is like one notch below. Like anything between like 125 and 110, it kind of doesn't matter to me. Like 110 is like a good like ledge to like hang on, right? Then you have your base 100 in Salamence, which is great. Like this, like 10-point jump is awesome because anything in between there has to pick and choose. 95 on the Indeedee, also great. You can probably scarf it. I imagine it'll be scarf, like expanding force quite a bit. And then it like it blends together a little bit here, but at the end of the day, like who really cares, right? It's still like a pretty decent, right? 30 points difference between them, so totally fine. You also have two Tailwind setters in Mance and Scizor. Yeah, there's nothing else that gets that. And then for Trick Room, you have Indeedee, Gengar, and Gallade, which is great, right? Good speed control. Ludicolo also has like Icy Wind, so you can do like Politoed, Swift Swim into Icy Wind stuff. Um, I don't know if we'll ever see like the Perish Song from Politoed. Like this team is obviously not built really for Perish Song. Um, but it's definitely a thing that can be used, right? You can like I guess what Whirlpool, uh, or like Fire Spin with Magmortar into Perish Song. Who knows? Um, and the Torterra is, I think, something that like might be a little bit slept on. I think it's a really good ground type. It has Headlong Rush, which is, famously, if you have Headlong Rush, you're pretty good. Um, and I know also like in singles, a lot of the time it would run like Shell Smash plus like loaded dice, Bullet Seed instead of like having to run Wood Hammer, which is also pretty cool. Um, so yeah, lots of potential. I think it's an interesting team with a lot of potential. That's my like quick summary. Um, and yeah, that's the last team. So how long did I just yap for? Like 2.5 hours? No, only two. Only two. I say only. Um, all right. If you watch the whole thing, why? Uh, I figure people will just sort of like skip around to their team if they watch it at all. Um, I don't know. Hopefully, my perspective on your team is like half correct. And if we play this season, I'm looking forward to it. If we don't, I don't know. Either you're excited or you're not. Is is what it comes down to. I'm sure there's some people that are like, "Oh, that matchup's so free, and I don't get to play them. That stinks." um, but yeah, I'm just gonna wrap it up. So, thank you all for watching. Goodbye.